Hello, everybody, and welcome back into a midweek episode of Chop It Up. This is somewhat of an emergency podcast due to all the NFL free agency signings and trades that have been going on the last couple of days. So we bring in our football expert here, Kaleb Unger, to the pod. Caleb, what a crazy week we've had. It's only Wednesday, and guys are flying around all over the place.
Got to be the first time in my life I've been called an expert. So I appreciate it. No, guys are going everywhere. What I like about this free agency class is that it's not like a ton of like really big names, but it's a lot of like I think really important players that are moving that could really change some teams' fortune for sure.
Yeah, no doubt that there's a lot of change going on, but let's start with the guy who stayed in a place where we thought we weren't going to see him. Myles Garrett re-signing with the Cleveland Browns, 4 years for 123 million. I gave this. Oh yeah, by the way, didn't mention this. We're going to be grading each move as the episode goes on as well. So I give Myles Garrett going back to Cleveland a B. I think that this is a Browns team that really is still struggling to find an identity. They don't have a quarterback. Nick Chubb is coming off injury again. Amari Cooper is gone. So they really just don't have a lot going for them. But I think bringing in a Myles Garrett and keeping a guy that's been the face of your franchise for multiple years, it somewhat keeps, the mojo going. It'll keep fans engaged. That defense will be somewhat solid simply just because of the fact that they have Myles Garrett. But at the same time, they just have so many holes to fill.
Yeah, I mean, I think you got to go B here. It's one of those situations where like I understand trading him and restarting and restocking and doing all that stuff. But like, what is that really going to get you? I mean, I think it's a B move, right? Because you can't really be mad. He's maybe at worst the third best defensive player in the league, and you don't want to get rid of those kinds of guys just because you stupidly signed Deshaun Watson to that massive contract. And so I think it's just one of those things where it's like, yeah, you love Miles Garrett, you want to keep him there, but you're also just sort of like, is this really going to change your fortune? I mean, he played a lot of games last year, and it wasn't like they were very good.
Yeah, I just think there's only so much that a defensive end can do, right? Like he's not really
Yeah.
going to score touchdowns. He's not going to put points on the board. Sure, he can put, an offense in down and distant situations and he can really be a disruptor, but in a conference like the AFC North as well, like this Cleveland team's just not going to go anywhere.
Um,
But that's just my thoughts.
Also, I think just like another big signing, obviously, a lot of money moving too was Max Crosby, sort of earlier in this cycle. And my dad's a huge Raiders fan, so we were kind of chopping that up a little bit. Get it? See what I did there?
I like it.
Um,
I like it.
But with Max Crosby, you kind of feel like he's that guy for the Raiders that's going to be a huge culture stepping stone, right? So maybe they're not winning right away, and you're paying a lot of money for a guy where, yeah, maybe you could trade him and get a bunch of other assets, but he like means a lot to that team mentality wise. Miles Garrett's just a really good football player. I don't think he does that much for them mentality wise. And so it's kind of like an interesting two deals to look at as they're kind of similar situations. But I think the Max Crosby one makes more sense to me. That's more of the one that I would give like an A, I guess, if we're looking at like examples. Because some people might be like, oh, Miles Garrett's one of the best defensive players in the league. Like you get him back, that's an A. But it is sort of that like, what is it really going to do for you?
Yeah, no, I'm completely with you there. Let's keep it moving to the offensive side of the ball. Devontae Adams heading to Los Angeles on a 2-year, $46 million deal. I gave this grade a B, or I gave this move a B minus. Um, is he entering wash status quite yet? Is he there? Is he almost there? I feel like we might be starting to get close here.
So I'm gonna go with a C because mainly he just seems like he's been kind of like a headache lately. I like Cooper Cup. It seems like he's a really good value player for them. Seems like him and Stafford have a really good relationship. So bringing in Devontae to sort of replace Cooper Cup doesn't make a ton of sense to me. You already got Puka Nakua. You already got a guy. You got Higbee at tight end. There's just a lot of stuff here that I'm just like, what? Also, there's all that beef that he had with Jimmy Garoppolo when he was in Las Vegas. And if this goes wrong, like Matthew Stafford has not shown himself to be the most durable guy as of late. He's just been getting hurt more and more, and I feel like we might be nearing like he's gonna miss time territory maybe this season if he takes the wrong hit, and then all of a sudden Jimmy Garoppolo's throwing him passes, and we all know Devontae Adams hated that when he played for the Raiders, hated it.
Yeah, I just think Devontae, and I like Devontae Adams, but the last couple of years, it's just been a guy that, like, he's going to go out there, he'll make some cool catches, but it seems like he's just kind of on the back end of his career, and especially with receivers a lot of the time. I think we just see them fall off pretty quickly. I mean, he had 8 touchdowns this last season. I know he played for 2 different teams, but that's the tied for the lowest amount of touchdowns he's had since 2019. And
Mhm.
I just don't see him getting back to an elite level that we've seen, throughout the majority of his career. And so I just, I think the Rams are an interesting team. I think the Cup move doesn't, I don't know. To me, it just doesn't make a ton of sense why you would just move off of a star wide receiver so quickly, especially if you bring back Stafford. Like bringing back Stafford tells your fan base you want to win. Letting Cooper Cup go kind of sends the opposite message, in my opinion.
Doesn't move the needle. Just doesn't move. It just feels like such like a lateral move, and you get rid of a guy who it seems like everybody in Los Angeles loved. Maybe they know something about Cooper Cup's injury status that I don't, but I'm not super confident in Devontae Adams to go out there and just be this healthy, productive player all the time.
Let's keep it in the wide receiver room at this particular time. DK Metcalf going to the Steelers. Blockbuster trade earlier this week. The Seahawks sent him to Pittsburgh. Seattle is just imploding right now. And they brought in Sam Darnold to tie it back together. We'll get into that in a minute. But DK gets a massive deal, 5 years, 150 mil. I gave it an A. I actually really like the deal. I know DK Metcalf is a hothead. That wide receiver room is going to be absolutely electric with him and George Pickens. I'm sure they will lead the league in amount of money through fines. I have full confidence in that. But I think the Steelers have elite weapons. Really, the only thing missing is a quarterback. And I think, with the way the market looks right now, sure, you're not going to go get a top tier guy necessarily, but you can still bring in a productive Aaron Rodgers, hopefully, or a guy of that nature who's maybe on the latter half of his career, a veteran. Maybe you go get a rookie and you go get your hands on a Jackson Dart or a guy in the second or third round or something like that. But at this moment in time, a team with Pat Fryermuth, DK Metcalf, and George Pickens, that's an elite offense. And we know their defense is always going to be consistent under Mike Tomlin. And so for that reason, I really like this move.
Yeah, I like this move a lot too. The only thing I don't like, so I gave this move about a B plus. The one thing that I don't like about it is the deal. I just think it's a lot of money to pay DK Metcalf. I know I have a lot of friends who are Seahawks fans who are like, yeah, we're gonna miss DK, but not at that number. Really good player. Obviously, if you can bring in a quarterback at a cheaper rate, like it's not that big of a deal. So you look at the guys that are out there, the Aaron Rodgers, the Russell Wilsons of the world. Even Russell Wilson, he looked pretty decent for that team at times. I think, yes, we saw him decline a little bit towards the end of the year, but I think that speaks a lot to just them knowing that Pickens was really the only guy that you had to cover. And so now with DK, it just adds a whole other element to their offense. I think these guys are just like a guaranteed 150 yards, a touchdown every week, maybe a 15-yard penalty too, but just really dynamic players, guys that can really play physical on the outside, which really helps too. They got a really good slot receiver in Calvin Austin, who was playing number two, playing out of position, and I think he's a guy who can thrive now that he gets to play in the slot. And same with Fryermuth. You have a lot of these guys who are number three options that had to, take on the number two role, and now that they don't have to do that, they can cook a little bit more, especially with a guy like DK, who is a better player than George Pickens. And so George Pickens also gets, the benefit of that.
Where do you think this changes things just in terms of the AFC North? Obviously, Baltimore is going to continue to be a force. You have the Bengals who are just making all these weird moves with franchise tagging T. Higgins, and obviously their defensive line is all messed up now. But is this Steelers team, is this something that elevates them? We saw last year in the playoffs as just a Steelers team that could not score the ball offensively. Do you think that this move does it move them above Cincy? Do they give Baltimore a run for their money? Like, where does this put them in the division?
I think it just puts them really similarly to where they were last year. It really depends who you bring in at quarterback. I do like bringing in Aaron Rodgers a little bit more than I would Russell Wilson. So if you can get an Aaron Rodgers, I do kind of hate losing Najee Harris, but also I like this draft as far as some of the late value that you can get at running back. There's a possibility that they can get an Ashton Genty even at that spot. And so if you look at those types of things, I think they definitely can be up there towards the top of that AFC North. think it really just depends who's throwing the football. But anytime that you add DK, they really didn't lose that much this offseason. So adding DK, I think, makes them at least a more dynamic offensive team, and at least an offensive team that when you get into that playoff time can get some guys that can actually get open for their quarterback.
Let's move on to our third and most likely final receiver that we're going to talk about on today's show. Chris Godwin, a guy that I really wanted to see in the red, white, and blue that is the New England Patriots. He goes back to Tampa. He's coming off an ankle injury, but he gets 3 years for just a little bit over 60 million. I gave it an A just because of the fact that I think it keeps the vibes up in Tampa. I do think that's a pretty steep price for a guy who is getting a little bit older and coming off a pretty significant injury there, getting hurt midway through the season, and that left him out for the rest of the year with that ankle injury. But at the same time, I think when you have Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, and you see the development of a guy like Jalen McMillan, shout out former Husky right there, then obviously just a gamer at the quarterback position in a guy like Baker Mayfield. I still think this Tampa team will be competitive next year, and I just think at this point, for them as an organization, you're just trying to keep as many of those winning pieces intact. And I think that this is what they did, and I think it's a solid move keeping here with Godwin.
And I think it's like an A plus culture move, right? It's this idea that, and I think from a lot of the reports I've read, Chris Godwin was going to get more money if he went somewhere else, particularly if he went somewhere else with that red, white, and blue jersey that we all love. And I think distinctly, some people will say, oh, it's because he didn't want to go play for the Patriots, and I don't buy into that crap. I'm thinking more. I think he likes playing in Tampa. I think guys like playing with Baker Mayfield. They like playing for a coach in Todd Bowles. And so I think you look at like those different aspects. This is an A plus. You get a guy at less of a rate, still a little bit of a steep rate for a wide receiver at his age with his injury history, but you get one of the better free agents for a cheaper rate because he wanted to be in Tampa. And so I think that speaks a lot to the Buccaneers culture. Even look at like a guy like Shaquille Barrett who wanted to come back and play in the playoffs for them last year. If you're Tampa Bay, you're like, wow, we have one of the best cultures in the league right now. That's crazy. And so good for them. Good pickup. Cool, Chris. Thanks. A little
Yeah, I
bitter.
mean, I was so excited. I have some people that I work with and are just a little bit in the know with the Patriots organization, not within the organization. I'm not that cool, but I got some friends who have friends. And
Yeah.
so, there's a lot of rumors going around that it was Chris Godwin or maybe it was DK, but Godwin was one that really seemed like there was a lot of steam picking up behind that move. I think I saw a report the other day from CBS that they did offer him about 5 to 10 million more on the
Yeah.
contract. But I mean, who doesn't want to play in Tampa? The weather's nice. It's awesome. Like you said, the vibes are good culture there. So can't really blame them. Let's get to the meat and potatoes of the free agency signings, and that is the quarterback position. That is what we all live for here as football
Why we're
fans.
here.
Let's keep it on the West Coast. Sam Darnold, the guy we've talked about a little bit. 3 years, circling around the $100 million range. That is a lot of money. I gave it a C plus. I think that if this was a Sam Darnold that was going into Seattle with DK and Tyler Lockett and Jackson Smith and Jigba, I would give this grade probably an A. But at this point, he's walking into an offense that has really no weapons outside of Smith and Jigba. I know they have a solid running game. I know Mike McDonald, probably has an idea of where this team's going. I think he's a good coach. But when you completely offload your receiver core and then you bring in a guy who, as great as he was last year, didn't win a playoff game,
Yeah.
and you pay him up to $100 million, and he's getting older. Like, I know they have Sam Howell, but are you really saying, all right, we're going to let Darnold be the guy and then Sam Howell is the future of our franchise? Like, I have a hard time believing that. And
Yeah.
so I gave it a C plus. I think it could work. I think they'll still be in that weird, awkward range of like fun to watch, could probably beat some teams better than them, but will also lose to teams that are not better than them. And I've been saying this for years, where the Seattle Seahawks are the kings of mediocrity. And I think they're going to stay there with the Sam Darnold move.
Yeah, honestly, I give it a B, mainly just because I think you're getting a quarterback who's around the same level as Geno Smith. I mean, obviously a way bigger question mark, but I think you're getting a guy who, at his best potential, is the same as Geno's best potential. So you get a guy who's a little bit younger than Geno. Pretty dynamic player last year. I like bringing him in with Clint Kubiak. I think Clint Kubiak actually did a pretty good job with the Saints offense last year. You couldn't tell by their record, but I mean, he had Spencer Rattler throwing to who knows. And so I really like that idea that you have these guys that can come in and you have Sam Darnold. Also, I know they lost Lockett. I know they don't have DK anymore, but Jackson Smith and Jigba great last year. He had a phenomenal year, so his trajectory is looking way up. If you're a fantasy owner, you want to get him. But also another guy that I think flies really under the radar for that team, and if you've seen Instagram, you know the Seahawks fans love him, is a Jake Bobo. UCLA Bruin, big body, really knows how to use his play style to his advantage. And so I like this Sam Darnold move. I don't love it. It feels like a pretty lateral move for the Seahawks, but I mean, you get a quarterback locked in a division that could go either way. I mean, I don't know how confident I am in the 49ers, Cardinals, or Rams right now. And so if you told me the Seahawks won that division at 9-8, wouldn't be surprised.
Let's not forget another very key member of the Seahawks wide receiver room, John Reese Plumlee from UCF, played football and baseball at the same time for Central Florida. If you guys know what I'm talking about, if you've ever seen the clip, he plays quarterback in the spring game, and then he takes a little golf cart over to the baseball stadium. Dual sport athlete. Now he's a part of the Seahawks wide receiver room, even though he was a
Know that.
quarterback in college. Watch out, Swiss Army knife, man. The next Taysom Hill is what they're telling me in Seattle.
That was a
Let's go.
flex. That was a flex by you. Pulling that one out was a
I
flex.
know. Watch out. Watch out. Let's go from West Coast to East Coast. Justin Fields is heading to Gotham, going to fulfill the tiny shoes that Aaron Rodgers left there with the Jets. 2 years, 40 mil. I mean, I think it's a chunk of change, but I'm a big Justin Fields advocate. I really liked him when he came in. I wanted the Patriots to draft him instead of Mac Jones. Ultimately, things went the way they went. He has Garrett Wilson in there. I think there's some other weapons he can get the ball to. So I gave it a B minus, but overall, this Jets team is just so dysfunctional. I know they bring in Aaron Glenn, so I expect the defense to hopefully make some jumps, even though they just cut CJ Mosley today. So just a lot of transition in this organization. I think that, this is really Justin's last stop to prove that he's a starting quarterback. And unfortunately, it's just going to come with an organization that really isn't that well developed in terms of being in the process of winning. However, I'm just a big Justin Fields guy. I think the connection between him and Garrett Wilson will be really important as they played together at Ohio State. But I just think it's hard to win in New York, no matter who you are.
Yeah. C. Don't get it. Don't get it for the. I get it for the Jets, right? You bring in a young guy who can run around, who can make plays, who clearly has shown that on bad teams he can still have some really bright moments. But for me, I'm so interested, and I we probably will never know. What did Pittsburgh offer him, right? Because 20 million isn't that crazy of a salary. So I'm looking at that developing offensive line in Pittsburgh, a decent running game still with Warren in the backfield, and then receivers. And you think that's the best move for him, right? Because it's a lot of no pressure for him. Not like they're going to bring in Russell Wilson also to play with him again. And so
Right.
him going to the Jets just makes no sense because it feels like basically what he's doing is he's saying, I'm going to put myself right back in the Bears situation, right? I mean, when he was on the Bears, he had DJ Moore, who I would say is a level maybe just below Garrett Wilson talent wise, maybe. And so it just doesn't make any sense to me from Justin Fields' perspective. From the Jets' perspective, you got the best of the young quarterback. You got the best and only young quarterback from this year's free agency class. Big win for Aaron Glenn. If it doesn't go well, it's just a huge loss for Justin Fields. And I'm the same way. I like Justin Fields. I like him as a guy. He doesn't really complain. He just seems to go out there and, do his business, but it's just a bummer. I just don't get it.
Yeah, the Steelers thing confuses me because when they signed Russ and Justin Fields, first of all, it's just a really weird move to make two guys that are probably playing at the same level. The only difference is they're about 10 years apart in
Yeah.
age. And so I think that was really interesting. I think, in my opinion, when Fields was playing well early on, I think they should have just let him
Yeah.
have it. And then Russ comes in and he kind of plays at a somewhat similar level. And so when Russ leaves, assuming he does leave and he doesn't come back to Pittsburgh, then you would think that Pittsburgh would make a push to get Justin Fields and just kind of keep that same mojo. He's familiar with a lot of those guys in the locker room, but ultimately that's not what ends up happening. I think it's really strange to see what both teams are doing between Pittsburgh and New York. Let's go to our final QB of the day, a real playmaker, a real legend in the NFL community. Daniel Jones,
Oh, I thought we were
Indianapolis,
going
1 year
Josh
deal.
Dobbs.
We could have gone Josh Dobbs. That's the pastronaut. How could I forget? I gave Daniel Jones a C heading to Indianapolis. This move made me mad, actually, and I don't know why, but I think maybe I'm just trying to defend the young quarterbacks. And not saying that Daniel Jones isn't young because, he was in New York for whatever it was, 3, 4 years. No one's going to win in that Giants organization anytime soon, in my opinion. So I don't think it's fully his fault. But at the same time, for the Colts, you have Anthony Richardson. And in my opinion, when you have a young quarterback, and you draft him in the first round, you have to fully commit to that quarterback. Year
Yeah,
one, Anthony Richardson gets hurt. Year two, he's inconsistent. He's battling injury. He has the weird tap out of the drive, I'm tired situation fiasco. He gets benched. And he comes back, and in my opinion, he played some decent ball, but nothing crazy. So that would lead you to year three, which is a prove it year. And then bringing in a guy to compete with him for the starting quarterback role, it just doesn't make sense, in my opinion.
yeah.
I know you want to have a competition. I know you want to put some sort of pressure on AR to be like, hey, you have to be able and go prove yourself. But I don't know that bringing in a guy to compete for the starting position is the way to do that.
Yeah, we kind of talked Fields like, does that move make a ton of sense for him? Like Daniel Jones and the Colts, for me, this makes sense for neither of them. First of all, Daniel Jones, why not stay with the Vikings potentially and get a chance to start on a team where you're going to be coddled in that offense, and then maybe next year you can get an even bigger contract opportunity. And kind of like what you said, I mean, Anthony Richardson, the dude either goes in there, he goes three and out with three incompletions, or he throws a bomb to Alex Pierce and they score a 70-yard touchdown. He's a dynamic player. When he's right, he is one of the most talented quarterbacks in the league, and I believe that. And you'd want to foster that a little bit more. For me, it just seems like this Colts organization is just kind of dysfunctional. I mean, this is the organization that hired Jeff Saturday off the couch. Um, I don't hate Daniel Jones. I'm not a Daniel Jones hater. I think, if anything, watching what the Giants have been doing over the last 5 years just shows you that they haven't done the best job in developing him. So who knows how good he really is? But it's like you said, why bail on Anthony Richardson basically like this? Because I mean, at least last year you brought in Joe Flacco, and Joe Flacco at that point was a backup. Daniel Jones isn't really a backup anymore, so it doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Yeah, I just don't. Yeah, you basically covered it. I just don't understand the move. Like you have a rookie who has so far been inconsistent, but has shown highlights of being really, really good. And you bring in a guy who's just kind of been a joke in the league for a little bit. Not saying Daniel Jones can't be productive somewhere, but to have two guys that are essentially starving for a starting role and putting them in a position where one of them is not going to be able to kind of showcase themselves just doesn't really make a lot of sense from the player's perspective and from the organization's perspective either. Like if Daniel Jones does go off and Anthony Richardson has a bad year, do you just discard Richardson and you just pay Daniel Jones a ton of money? That doesn't make sense. We've already seen the Giants do that, and we all know how that went. So it doesn't make sense
Yeah.
that another team would do that. But if there was an organization that was going to do it, maybe it is the Colts.
Well, and they just lost, I think, like three offensive linemen in this cycle.
Yeah.
And so it's just one of those things where it's like, once again, are we setting up Anthony Richardson to fail? Probably. And then we get another one of these stupid situations where a Sean McVay, if you think about it, say Matthew Stafford retires next year, Sean McVay picks up Anthony Richardson off the heap, all of a sudden puts him in an offense that's friendly to him, and all of a sudden you got a guy that's playing well. So it's one of those things where we're seeing this cycle continue to go. It's why Baker Mayfield's doing what he's doing, Sam Darnold, Geno Smith. It's these teams bail on these quarterbacks because they didn't work, and they're like, I don't understand why. And it's like, maybe it's because of you.
It's a great point.
It's like
Great
that
point
guy that
there.
cheats on his girlfriend and he's like, I don't know why she broke up with me.
Exactly. The girlfriend analogies on this show when we're on is elite. I highly recommend when you see the quad culture chop it up collab, just know there's some good analogies coming in for all of you people in a relationship out there. Let's uh let's get back to Buffalo here. Joey Bosa, defensive end, leaves San Diego slash LA, goes out east to the frigid cold. I gave this move an A minus. I think Joey Bosa fits the Buffalo culture very well. For a variety of reasons I don't need to say, but I just think he fits the culture pretty well. And also, it's another guy to get after Mahomes. I think the Bills are reaching that point where you are essentially building your team to beat one other team in the entire NFL, and that's the Kansas City Chiefs. And so you get another guy who is he older? Yes. Is he less productive than he was in his prime? Yes. But at the same time, it's just another body you can throw out there on a third down or a big time play late in the fourth quarter, and he can come up with a sack or just be disruptive at the very least. And so for that reason, I just really like this move for the Bills.
When I saw this on the doc, because I love this move, I was like, am I gonna say something about how he just like fits the Bills, like that he's a Bills player? And I didn't, but I'm glad you did because no truer words. I mean, this is a trade basically, right? You release Von Miller and you sign Joey Bosa. And I think Joey Bosa is just a better player than Von Miller is right now. Von Miller, obviously, an all-time great player. But Joey Bosa, just more physical player. He can do a little bit more as a defensive end within that defense. And so I really like the move. You just got to hope that you can kind of keep him in check and that he doesn't give you a costly penalty because, the Chargers will tell you he'll do that here and there.
100%. I think that this is a move, and like we said, it's also a maintenance move. Like it keeps them kind of solidifying that top
Hmm.
spot at probably the AFC East, as much as me and you hate to say that. But I think this is a Bills team that, I understand their fans, it's frustrating to lose to the same team over and over and over. And this is the same franchise that lost four Super Bowls in a row. So the frustration, no one's been through it more than Bills fans have. But at the
Yeah.
same time, there's not really like an issue. Like, sure, there's always a play two or three times each time they match up with Kansas City. But with that being said, it just doesn't really feel. I mean, what do? You don't move off of Josh Allen. Sure, you're going to have role guys who come in and out year in, year out, but there's not like some drastic change that needs to happen. And so I
Yeah.
think bringing in a guy like Bosa, it keeps you in the hunt. It keeps you really competitive. And eventually, I mean, at this point, I think all of America is rooting for them to beat the Kansas City Chiefs at some point.
Yeah. And I think I mean, their whole offseason, just, I love that you use that word maintenance. It just reeks feels rude. It just reeks of a team that's just like we were close. What's saying that we can't? And you look at their young receivers in Shakir and Keon Coleman. Those guys, I feel like, are only going to develop. They get a Joshua Palmer to replace a Max Hollins, and so it's just one of those things where I agree with you. They're a team that are like, we're so close. We're not going to be stupid and blow this up. When you're going to the AFC Championship like every other year, it just doesn't make sense to blow it up.
No, it makes no sense to blow it up. And honestly, right now, I think looking just at how the Chiefs season ended, I know it was in the Super Bowl, but in my opinion, that's just a brutal way to go out.
Yeah.
And so I think the Bills are going to be a serious contender. And obviously, that's not some big shocking news, but I think that this is a team that you're going to continue to see at the top of the AFC, especially with the massive extension that Josh Allen got. But with this episode, we saved the best for last. We saved our New England Patriots, a team that has spent the most money in free agency. They've, most likely signed the most guys, at least the most talent. And oddly enough, it's been on the defensive side of the ball. Obviously,
Mhm.
this is a Patriots team that has holes at a lot of different positions. But when you have a quarterback in Drake May, typically you would look at the offensive side of the ball first, especially with how abysmal the offensive line was and the lack of weapons in the receiving room. But I actually do like the moves they make. You bring in Harold Landry, linebacker from the Titans. You bring in Milton Williams, coming fresh off that Super Bowl. He's in his prime. And then you bring in Carlton Davis to put on the other side of a stud in Christian Gonzalez. And so bolstering this defense, they're going to be tough. They're going to be nasty. It's going to be a Mike Vrabel led team. And we've seen that on day one of free agency. So no surprises here for me.
So I'm gonna hijack this a little bit because I have a question for you in this sort of figurative situation, right? So love Duggar at safety. I've always loved Duggar. I think he's getting so close to his breakout. You have Gonzalez, who's a legit number one corner. You put Davis across from him, who's another legit number one corner. So you have two really good corners on both ends. Harold Landry's a really good pass rusher, but with Williams and Barmore now, and they signed another defensive tackle, you're going to have that sort of Philadelphia Eagles rotation. Maybe not as nasty, but you have three really solid guys that are going to be rotating in. And then on the offensive line, you got a Morgan Moses. I felt like the Patriots played pretty well guard center wise. I think they really just need another tackle. Because as much as the Cole Strange pick gets like kicked around, he's been pretty good. And so, and I like Ramondre, I like Antonio Gibson, I like Drake May. So in this event that the draft goes exactly the Patriots way, right? Say they do a trade back, they get a really good tackle, they get Banks, right? You get in that 11, 12 range, you get Banks, which because I don't want short arms Campbell. That's just how I feel. But and then in the second round, right, you get a receiver. Maybe you grab the guy from Ole Miss, who I've seen sometimes fall that far. The other guy from Texas, is it Golden? Is he the other one?
Yeah,
'Cause-
gold.
yeah,
Yeah.
you get a Golden, right? Because the Patriots have missed consistently on these second round receivers. And say this time they get it right, right? Because we've seen a lot of these guys that go in the second and third round at receiver end up being the better receivers of the class. I don't think it's crazy to say that with a really good defense and improved offensive line, with how we saw Drake May play last year, that this Patriots team could be a 9-8, 10-7 team, just purely off of like these little improvements and Mike Vrabel just bringing so much of a better energy than Mayo did. What is your thought as I sort of break it down, and what do you think wide receiver tackle wise they should do?
I think being in the number four spot is really awkward because obviously every person at every big network is like, oh, Travis Hunter's going to be there. Don't you want Travis Hunter? And honestly, no, I don't want a guy who was
No,
okay
no,
as a defensive back and a wide receiver. We don't need a defensive back anymore. And I don't need a
no,
guy who plays wide receiver as a side piece. I need a guy that can go off in a playoff game in Buffalo on the road in the
no
cold.
truer words have been said. No truer words have been said than what you're saying right now.
I do like. I think you go either offensive line at four, or you trade back for Banks, like you said. I think you get the better value. I actually do like Will Campbell. I know the arms thing is kind of weird, but I just based on what I've seen from him, he's a tough guy. LSU is going up against the best defensive lineman in the nation. There's no doubt about that. And so I think it's a win-win whether you go Campbell or Banks. I think they're both really good. I think the Patriots have always done, obviously, as we know, a really good job of developing guys who maybe don't jump out as much, at the
Yeah,
combine or the draft. And so I definitely think you go offensive lineman early on. And then honestly, I know it might seem a little Madden-esque, but I'm taking my second round pick and my two thirds, and I'm drafting three wide receivers because one of them has got to work. One of them's got to pan out. They
yeah.
went Jalen Polk last year. We know they've gone with different guys in the past that just haven't really worked out, like N'Keal Harry instead of DK Metcalf. That one still killed me. Oh, oh, I'm coughing just thinking about how bad that pick was. But yeah, I mean, I think you go receivers. I really like Golden out of Texas. I think anytime you draft a wide receiver out of a major team, they're going to know how to play within a system, and so I think that that's
Mhm.
really important. But you have to get weapons, and that's not really to discount the guys we already have. I think Jalen Polk could pop in year two. Another Washington Husky there. Shout out. And I think your Demario Douglases and your Kendrick Bournes are reliable options as well.
Booty.
Booty. Don't count out the booty.
But
Come
also,
on now.
I think it showed how smart the Patriots were. Not many people their eyes are gonna pop out of their heads at the Austin Hooper re-signing. But like he was a huge safety blanket for Drake May last year. He played really well within that offense as their second tight end. And so it's just something I guess we don't like Austin Hooper.
He's coughing
But
up a lung over here.
it was something that I really, really liked, right? And I think we've talked about this a little bit, even just last year. This is a team that has like legitimately five guys that would be such a good number two, but they're all look like number threes out there because there's no guy that's going to take away all the attention. And so if you can get a really strong talented guy in there, whether it's, like we talked about Golden. I like the guy at Stanford too. Just give me a guy who can legitimately get separation, one-on-one coverage that every once in a while a team might be like, we should maybe double him.
Before we go here, obviously talking about receivers, Cooper Kupp got released today. Is that a guy that we could see in New England? We know how these wide receivers fare in Foxborough. They're elite. But Cooper Kupp's a West Coast guy, obviously coming from Eastern
Yeah.
Washington, Pacific Northwest rep. So shout out there. But where do you think he goes?
I mean, I would lean Seattle. I heard that Dallas was in the running for quite a while, but they're not as interested anymore. I'm not really sure where the spot is for him. I think Green Bay, I've seen that thrown out a little bit, is very interesting just from the aspect of I think they're looking for a veteran receiver who can do more of the possession type stuff. And so I think those are two teams to look at. I wouldn't put it past Cooper Kupp to go to the Patriots. There is that connection with the Patriots pass game coordinator that he worked for the Rams. The only thing with Cooper Kupp is I think to get him to go to New England over Green Bay or Seattle, who are obviously teams that to me look like a little bit more from the outside that they're a little bit more ready to win, that they have maybe a weaker division or a team that's already been to the playoffs. You just have to throw more money at him. You just have to up an offer to a point where he'd be like, "Nah, I can't really say no to that." And I think that that's just really the way that you get him is that you just have to say you have to pitch the place, the connection, and then say we're going to pay you 3, 4 million more yearly than everywhere else.
No, I agree with you there. I think, as Patriot fans, it's really hard every time you see a star right wide receiver to be like, oh, all right, here we go. Like we finally got him.
Yeah,
Obviously, that hasn't really been the case yet. But I think the Patriots are fine. I think the Cup sweepstakes will be really interesting to follow as well. But he'll land somewhere. He'll be a successful guy. He's still at the top of his powers. That is pretty much going to wrap it up for what I have. Do you have anything else before we get out of here?
I do have one more question for you. Um, Dylan Gabriel, right? I don't understand what separates him from Bo Nix as you look at these guys like Quinn Ewers and Will Howard and all of those kind of like middle tier guys. I don't understand why he's not more in that conversation because for me, a casual college football fan, he doesn't seem that far off from Bo Nix. So what's that far off from him being, don't get me wrong, not a first round pick, but a second, third round pick with the Jackson Darts of the world?
Yeah, I mean, for starters, Bo is 6'2", around there, and I think Dylan Gabriel's hovering around 6 feet, 5'11". And as me and you both know, 3 inches is a lot, and so that's all I'm going to say. But yeah, like it's a lot, and I'm not just talking about the quarterback room. If you're picking up what I'm putting down,
But
but jokes aside, I also think that Bo and Dylan were both in college for a really long time, but by the end of Nick's career, he was at such an elite level that you couldn't discredit what he had done. And not to say that Dylan Gabriel wasn't a really good college football quarterback, but I wouldn't think that he was at the same level Bo was. I think Dylan Gabriel, you could even make the argument, had better weapons around him. I think the offensive line was a little bit better. And there was just times too where Bo would make really good throws, and you'd say that's an NFL caliber throw. And for Dylan Gabriel, just based on what I saw, a lot of it was just short scheme routes where it was more of just getting it into the playmaker's hands rather than, being able to make a play on your own and make a read. A lot of it was RPO stuff where guys are just wide open in spots that the coaches put them in. And that's not to say he can't throw a good deep ball either, but I just think that Bo was a little bit more complete. He has a little bit bigger build. And then just from what I've heard, obviously, I think Bo, not to say that Dylan Gabriel isn't mature, but Bo just tested really well in interviews. Obviously,
yeah,
just hearing what Sean Payton has said as well, that he just really enjoyed talking to him about football. I just haven't heard that same thing about Dylan, not to say that it's not there. But I just think at some point, if you're going to stay in college for whatever it was, 7, 8 years, I think Dylan Gabriel started at UCF when I was in like eighth grade, and I'm a sophomore in college now. And
yeah.
so not, and that's what a lot of guys do. But at the same time, I just think that he wasn't at such an elite level by the end of his career where you go, this is someone we have to seriously consider. And GMs don't love guys that aren't breaking 6 feet either. So I think that's the big difference for sure.
Yeah, so do you think, I guess, like obviously a really quality player, potentially a really quality backup, but you're looking at a guy who had a couple of stops and then probably had his best performance on the best team that he's ever played on.
Yeah, and I think when you're looking at any quarterback that goes to Oregon, you're looking at a quarterback that is thrown to some of the best talent in the country. It's just how they
Mhm.
recruit and with how much Nike money they get from those guys, it's hard to compete. And so I just think I think the stops do add up. Like he went to three colleges. He was good at each one, but when you're just throwing the ball around all day, I think it's pretty easy to put up good numbers.
Yeah.
And that's me not trying to be a hater. Obviously, I'm not a big Oregon guy. But what I will tell you is that Bo Nix and Dylan Gabriel will never win a big game in the NFL because that is the Oregon way. They never win big games at the quarterback position. I mean, Justin Herbert, great talent. I actually do like Justin Herbert, despite the fact that he went to Oregon and my rival high school. But he's a good guy. He's never going to win a big game. I mean, come on now. And
Do we
but yeah,
think
that's
do we
go
think
ahead.
Dylan Gabriel good comp Case Keenum?
I feel like that's a discredit to Case Keenum.
Oh my gosh.
I would say Dylan Gabriel. Oh man, I wish I could. I don't even know if there's someone out there. I really maybe like a little bit more. This is gonna sound crazy, but like a Walmart Dollar Tree version of Drew Brees and left-handed, maybe, and
Yeah,
better arm strength.
like maybe a Walmart San Diego Drew Brees.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. That is a fantastic way to put it.
You taking him or Will Howard? Gun to your head.
I mean, did you watch that Rose Bowl?
That's fair. Okay.
I mean, but Will Howard was awful at the combine. I will say that. But hey, man, the Rose Bowl, granddaddy of them all, speaks for himself.
Yeah, pretty
They killed him.
nasty.
So, well, that is going to wrap it up for this episode of Chop It Up. We hope you guys enjoyed it. Be sure to go check out Caleb's page. He's putting out really good stuff, and it's not just sports; it's movies, it's music. You just did what? The Emmys, the Grammys. What was that?
Oscars. Yeah,
The,
we talked a little Oscars. Yeah, the occasional just, Cooper flag thirst session, that's what you're getting on quad culture. So,
Yeah, be sure to go check it out. It's really entertaining stuff, and I'm sure that we will collab again once the March Madness tournament rolls around. And throughout that, we will definitely be sure to be getting you guys as well. Obviously, you know where to find me: Spotify, YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. Wherever you're doing social media, we are there. And the podcast is growing, so let's keep it moving. Caleb, we want
let's
to thank you
go.
for coming on. We really enjoy having you on, and we will catch you guys on the next one.
Let's go.